Hey guys, how's it going? I've been running the Redarc battery chargers for at least 3 years now. So today I've come down to Redarc HQ here in Adelaide. We're going to have a look around and find out why they're some of the best battery chargers on the market. All right, let's get to it. So we've got Cam here from Redarc. Cam, why don't you introduce yourself, tell me a bit about your role and what you do here.
Sure. So Cameron Moore, also known as Cam or Munch on the phones. My role is a customer support technician. So whenever there's someone that has a query about our product, whether it be someone not knowing if it's working properly, how to get something that's working that's not working properly, wanting to know what they need for their application, and then quite a lot of times there's just general automotive electrical questions come through as well. Yep. Typically we take care of that sort of questions, answers, either by phone calls, emails. We've got a forum on our website, and then obviously on your socials as well.
So you're okay with me asking you a few questions today?
Absolutely.
Awesome, let's get to it.
Rightio, we come inside, we had a lot of traffic going past, so it was pretty hard to film.
Yes, it's a bit of a busy road, that one.
It is. Now, what range of chargers do you offer and what applications do they suit?
Okay, so we have well over 15 chargers.
Yeah.
But for the sake of this and
we'll keep it
what
simple,
you're trying to do, we'll keep it simple with the typical RV side of things.
Yeah.
So we have the 20, 25, 40 and 50 amp BCDC chargers.
Yep.
20 amps typically typically used for battery banks between 40 and 80 amp hours.
Yep.
From there up to about 180, 190, 200, we have the 25 amp charger. From there to about 210, 220, you look at the 40 amp charger, and from there on, you look at the BCDC 1250D.
Yep.
We also obviously have our management system, the Manager 30, which is typically used in the canopies and that style of application, somewhere where it's sealed.
Yep.
And obviously, besides the 20 amp charger, they all have the ability for DC-DC charging and solar input.
How does the Green Power Priority work?
Okay, so with the Green Power Priority, when you utilise this charger that we have here, being the yellow one being the solar wire, basically what will happen is it will always try and look at that and try and use it first.
Yep.
As long as there's something there that it can use, it will. Then, if the charger still has room, or the battery that it's trying to send power to still has the ability to accept more current without going over voltage, and the engine of the vehicle is running at the same time, but it'll be drawing power on this red wire, it will then draw additional power at the same time, so it can actually draw on both sources to make sure that we're not loading up the vehicle as much as what normally would be without solar available. And it just sort of works out itself, gets what it can from solar, additional from vehicle to charge that auxiliary battery properly.
Cool. What kind of vehicle can run a smart isolator, and when should you start looking at a charger?
Okay, so vehicles that have a fixed voltage alternator, such as your Mitsubishi Tritons, your older vehicles, sort of pre-2004, that number does vary a little bit depending on the manufacturer of the vehicle, and even in some cases model.
So you're probably better off contacting your dealer first. And
contacting the dealer, or jumping on our website, or even giving us a call. On our website we do have a dual battery system selector tool, which has the vehicles that we have a listing of the vehicles that we know. And from there, the vehicles with those fixed voltage alternators, you can use an isolator. The next style of alternator off the bat is a temperature compensating alternator, which is basically what Toyotas from about 2004 onwards have, as well as other brands of the vehicle as well. The Toyota is just the typical one that people use as a benchmark. That's when you want to start considering a charger. In some cases, yes, you can get away with an isolator, but typically they don't charge the battery properly and completely. So a DC-DC charger is definitely a better way to go. And then for your newer vehicles, such as your Ford Rangers, your Mitsubishi Pajeros, they have these smart alternators, which basically, not basically, but in layman's terms, they can turn the alternator off.
Yes.
And what can happen then is your start battery will drop to 12.6, 12.5-ish. That number, again, will vary from manufacturer to manufacturer.
Yep.
Obviously, that sort of voltage is not going to charge an auxiliary battery through an isolator. And the idea of the charger is it will boost that voltage to a nice high voltage on the output to make sure it charges that auxiliary battery properly.
Yep. And that's when you use that blue wire?
Yes, exactly right. So that blue wire is the low voltage trigger wire. Basically what it does is tell the charger to go into low voltage mode, so it turns on at 12 volts being detected on the red wire and turns off at 11.9. Probably a useful bit of information is this blue wire is not necessarily an ignition trigger, and why I mention that is once that gets disconnected, it will revert the charger back to normal turn on, turn off thresholds. So 13.2 volts on, 12.7 volts off.
So with the older vehicles, you wouldn't connect that blue wire then?
Correct.
Yep.
Yeah, just tape it up and tuck it away.
Can you explain Red Vision and what advantages someone would get if they were considering upgrading from a BCDC charger?
Okay, so that's a bit of a funny one because they do actually do quite different jobs. Red Vision is a power distribution unit.
Yes.
Designed for caravans, camper trailers, motorhomes. Quite a lot of canopies are having it fitted these days. It controls power to your lights, your fridges, all that sort of style. The BCDC is a charger. You can run the BCDC charger with the Red Vision system, but typically people will decide to use a Manager 30 to bring up that battery information on the screen at the same time.
And that all links together, the Manager 30?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. And that also tidies up the wiring a lot, doesn't it?
Very much so.
If you run a compressor through the Red Vision, can you set the PSIs through the Red Vision?
Not at this stage. It is something that has been queried a lot.
Yes.
And the engineers have been taking it into consideration. How much attention, how far away that is, I can't say. I'm not too sure.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it will be something that will be available in the future.
That'd be a good addition, yeah. Oh, how easy is the Red Vision and Manager 30 to install?
So with the aftermarket manufacturers, that is quite easy for them because they have a pre-planned idea and layout ready to roll. For a completely custom application, can be a little bit daunting at first.
Yeah.
But with the style of connectors that we have on the Red Vision system and the Manager 30 certainly makes an installation easier. It does look daunting with the amount of connectors and with the routing of cables in modern vehicles can be quite hard, but certainly it is easier than running individual fuses, individual switches, going to the battery, looking like a bit of a bird's nest.
Yes.
It certainly neatens and makes an installation a lot easier for an end user.
Do you think it's something with someone with a basic 12-volt knowledge could do, or should they get a professional to do it, you reckon?
It's a case-by-case scenario. Generally, people that have done installs in the past, they can do it.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things, if you don't feel confident, that we do recommend a professional do it.
Better off being safe than burning down the car.
Correct, absolutely.
Alright, would there be a 50 amp version of the Manager 30?
Okay, so with the demand in this industry, I have no doubt that it will be inevitable.
Yep.
What current rating, I'm not sure. I'm sure it'll be more than the 30 we have available at the moment.
Yep.
But it is one of those things with us being an engineering firm, there are lots of projects on the go. 15 cents of every dollar made goes back into the engineering and R&D side of the business, so there's a huge amount of money going into that sort of
constantly evolving
side.
Yeah.
When, how much, all that sort of information, I can't advise, but I have no doubt in the future there will be something
at least
more powerful
it's in the pipeline. Yep. Cool. Alright, where's the optimal place to mount a BCDC charger?
Ideally, you want it as close as possible to the battery that you're trying to charge. The whole idea of it is it overcomes voltage drop.
Yes.
So, like I was mentioning previously with cable lengths and stuff like that, you want the charger nice and close to the battery. You can get some voltage drop between the start battery and the charger. As we said before, this can boost voltage, so this will overcome that voltage loss. and recharge that battery properly. The shorter length between the charger and the auxiliary battery obviously means you're going to get less voltage drop, which means you get optimal charge going into the battery. And that's the same with the solar regulators as well. Ideally, you want them as close as possible to the battery you want to charge.
Yep, and I notice times are changing too. Quite for years now, everyone's put them under their bonnets, where it's quite hot, and now you're bringing out mounts where you can mount it behind the grills, so you get better airflow and cooler.
Correct, absolutely. With the way that the DC-DC chargers are done, that sort of location is fine. One of the more common questions we get is obviously, is it going to be fine for that sort of application? It certainly will be fine for anything that, well, with the exception of a car crash.
Hold up! This footage shows a battery charger mounted behind the grille involved in a head-on accident, and somehow the battery charger is still working. These chargers are so tough.
It'll be fine with the typical environment, dust, vibration, water, all that sort of stuff.
Yep, cool. What makes these so strong?
Inside these devices is a complex and proprietary potting mix.
Yes.
Seals all the electronic components, makes it safe for vibration, makes it safe for any potential water ingress. Dust is obviously not going to damage if water can't get in. The metal casing is anodized black to help dissipate heat.
Yep.
And with mounting out the front, obviously the wind going past will assist that as well.
Yep, so you don't have to worry about water at all with this.
Correct.
Awesome. Do you have plans on releasing a plug and play charger to make it easy for someone to just swap over?
Not at this stage with the BCDC charger. Like I mentioned before, there's lots of R&D going on. That question has been asked numerous times.
Yep.
It's sort of on the back burner as a potential at the moment. But watch this space, there could be something in the future, but to my knowledge, I don't believe so.
Okay. Alright, can you explain how the Manager 30 works and what sort of features it has?
Okay, so this section could take a little bit of time. Basically, it is a DC-DC charger and a solar regulator like the BCDC chargers, well the D variants anyway. It is also a 240 volt charger. Does the isolation, solar regulation, DC-DC charging. There are a few more features that's not involved with the BCDC D series of chargers is that it is a full management system.
Yep.
So it has a display with a readout giving you information in regards to battery percentage. It can give you an indication of how long till flat or how long till full based on current going in or out of the battery.
Yep.
It will provide you information on solar generated throughout the day as well as a memory log of previous days as well, so you can compare good weather to bad weather. If you've been camped up under a tree or you've been out in the sun, or even if you can compare, say if you've got a connectorized style of setup, so you can add a folding panel or a solar blanket, you can compare panels to other panels. There is a load and charging screen, current screen, that gives you an indication of where current is flowing within the system. So if you have the charger generating say 20 amps, but you have a load that's drawing 30 amps, you'll see on that screen 20 amps leaving the charger, 10 amps leaving the battery, and then 30 amps going into the load symbol. There is also the ability for a load disconnect with that item. It can control a load disconnect device such as our SBI12-LLD or BLD, so our dedicated load disconnect solenoids. Can turn off items either via battery percentage, which is typically the more popular fashion for lithium batteries, but you can program to turn off dedicated voltages as well, which you program into the system.
That's awesome. Sounds a lot smarter than your typical charger.
It's definitely a more built system, but it is definitely a much larger system, not really the ideal thing for an under bonnet application. Typical full drive dual battery system, but canopy builds, like I mentioned it before, canopy builds, caravan, motorhome, definitely a go-to choice.
So it sounds like you can track just about everything with that.
Pretty much.
Awesome. And the display, you can mount that anywhere you like?
You want it mounted somewhere out of the elements.
Yep.
But other than that, yes.
Yep. Cool. Can you run the Manager 30 as well as another charger together? Will it work?
It is not something we've actually done in-house as of yet, but we know a number of our installers have been doing so. For example, running a Manager 30 with a BCDC 1250D in parallel.
Wow.
So giving yourself up to 80 amps of charging potential. As I said, it's not something we mentioned, but we have no problem with people doing it. It's not like we're going to avoid warranty or anything like that. It's perfectly fine for it. The screen of the Manager 30 will look a little bit funny when a charger external of the Manager is providing power.
Yep.
But they will work happily together as long as it's one of our chargers.
Oh, cool. Alright, does the Manager 30 need a battery isolator?
Doesn't have to have one. You can have an isolating device for a load disconnect.
Yep.
There is some applications where one is desirable, especially if you start talking about a camper trailer application. Where that can be advantageous is controlling the Anderson plug power supply with a vehicle that has a smart alternator, and where that can be more helpful or easier for installer as well as an end user is that you can use your power supply as an ignition source at the same time.
Oh yeah, yep.
Vehicles with your smart alternators, Manager 30 and BCDC, you'll need to have an ignition supply.
Yep.
In most cases, you'll find people will run through, most of the time, pin 2 of your trailer socket.
Yes, yep.
Through to either your BCDC or to your Manager 30 for the ignition supply. So when that smart alternator starts backing off, the charger will continue to run. What can be helpful is that in some situations, getting a wire to pin 2 on the trailer, a wire through the aim frame can be quite painful to do.
Oh, okay, yep.
So where you can get away with it is having an ignition controlled Anderson plug, setting up your charger to use the power supply also as an ignition supply.
Oh, okay.
That way it switches on and off when you turn the key on and off.
Yep.
And we do have a diagram on the website indicating this as well.
I wasn't aware of that, that's cool.
Mm.
Alright, say for example someone has completely flattened their lithium batteries, completely dead. Will it wake up a lithium battery?
The latest software of the BCDCs will. The Manager 30, with the way that it's set up, we have not gone down that path. The idea of the Manager 30 is that you have a load disconnect, so you cut things off before the battery's internal BMS will shut down.
Yep.
So with that one, in that sort of situation, if your battery were to run completely flat, if you were to have 0 volts across the terminals and the system shuts down, most lithium batteries, it's safe to put like a jump starter pack on, just give a bit of power.
Okay. And
that'll kick the Manager 30 back into gear. The latest software of the BCDC does have 0 volt lithium battery startup technology included into it as of the start of this year, I think it was, from memory.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. Do your chargers have a built-in solar regulator?
Absolutely. With the BCDC D series of chargers, so you'll see on the end of the part number a D, and also you'll see the second to last light on the right hand side, or left hand side, depending if you're holding it like that or like that. There is a solar LED, and with the charger wiring itself, it is the yellow wire. Run your solar panel positive to that one. With the Manager 30, it doesn't have cables. It does have a dedicated pin for a 12 volt solar panel to be hooked up, and you can either have panels on the roof of your vehicle or caravan, whatever it is that you got. You can have an Anderson plug hooked to that, or you could have a mixture of both.
Yep.
So have a panel on the roof, maybe make a wire splice or a wire junction, something like that, and have another wire running off to an Anderson connector. Anderson connectors are typically the most common thing for the solar world, seeing as they're reliable and high current capable.
Yep.
And that will give you the ability to add a folding panel or a solar blanket, something like that, so you can increase your solar capacity.
I've done the same thing on my car. I've got the two 100 watt panels on each door, and then I've got an answer plug at my tow bar, where I just plug in my 300 watt fold out panel, so I've got 500 watts of solar anytime. But what happens if someone has got a fold out panel and it's got a built-in regulator already?
That regulator will need to be bypassed.
Yep.
What will happen with most regulators, they will need to see a battery before they'll send power out.
Yes.
Some won't have that sort of necessity, they'll just send power out regardless, but most will need to see a battery. When you're trying to run it through a charger, you're basically trying to restrict solar energy twice.
Yes, yeah.
So it just won't work.
No.
There are potentially two options. Have that regulator permanently disabled.
Yep.
What most people will do will actually have an adapter connection, so they can have the solar panel going directly to a DC-DC charger.
Yep.
And then if they have a friend or sort of a colleague or someone like that that's with them that is having a bit of grief, they can disconnect it from their setup, run it through a regulator onto their battery, so you can share.
Yep.
Normally we say with that sort of application, you're always better off going through the DC-DC charger. It is a MPPT solar regulator. You find most standalone regulators are a PWM, and without going into the nitty-gritty side of things, basically an MPPT regulator is more efficient. But also with the BCDC, it's obviously going to be mounted closer to the battery.
Yep.
Which means that you have a lower voltage, higher current for a short length of cable, as opposed to a solar regulator mounted on the back of the panel. You're going to have a higher current, lower voltage for a longer length of cable, so there's more potential for power loss.
Yep.
But also with the regulator mounted onto the back of a panel, they are a power device and they do lose efficiency with heat. Obviously in that sort of situation, it's going to be modifying or controlling the power from the solar panel, so it'll be generating heat internally. But then also obviously radiant heat from the sun hitting the panel is going to sort of feed through onto the regulator. So there was two sources, or technically three sources of potential loss with a panel mounted regulator setup.
Yeah, they really don't like heat.
No, but as I said, it can be quite handy if you want to have that style of adapted connection set up and then let someone else use your panel when you don't need it.
So if the regulator on the panel doesn't already have multiple ends plugs so you can bypass it, you would recommend cutting the wires lead from the panels into the regulator, the input, and just adding a couple of ends plugs there so they can choose whether to go direct off the panel or into the regulator?
Very common thing to do.
Yep. Yep. Alright, say your lithium battery already has a built-in BMS. Do you have to disable that at all? Will it interfere with this system?
No. So we actually recommend that you have a lithium battery with an internal BMS.
Yeah.
For example, the batteries that we have available have an internal BMS. What they do is not really the same thing as a charger. The main idea of an internal BMS is that it manages the cells as opposed to managing the overall battery. Best way probably to describe that was with our management system. So it looks at the overall battery, it charges it, and obviously keeps it maintained when in storage as well. The internal management system of a lithium battery typically equalizes the cells, make sure that they're all safe, because lithium typically has a very low resistance compared to other chemistries of batteries.
Yep.
Something like an internal BMS is required to make sure that they don't go too out of sync with each other, which can obviously, if one battery cell's getting more power than the last, or accepting more power than the one next to it, that one cell could overheat, get overcharged, and you have premature failure of your battery. Some other features of internal BMSs is an over voltage shutdown or an under voltage shutdown, because especially with an undercharged situation, you drain them too far, typically they won't recover, regardless of how old or new they are.
Okay, yes.
So yeah, that internal BMS is designed to look after the cells inside, rather than to take over and actually do the charging of the battery.
Yep. So with your chargers, how do they actually know which type of battery they're charging?
Okay, so this is something that they can't do, and as far as I'm aware, there is nothing on the market that can. There's nothing that can tell the difference between what chemistry and size a battery is by hooking up a positive and a negative.
It's just the voltage, it's sort of just picking up.
Exactly, so it's just saying, alright, so we have a battery at this voltage, when I start working I'm going to monitor the current and I'll dictate what I need to do based off of the setting that the installer feeds the actual charger. Now with our charger, this is done with the orange wire. That's the profile select wire, so whether you leave it disconnected, you connect it to a positive, you connect it to a negative, or you link it to the green wire with the D series of chargers. That is how you select either profile A, B, C, or linking your green and orange, like I mentioned, will select your lithium profile.
Yep. And the green wire also has a second function as well?
Yeah, so this green wire can operate a little 3-volt LED. The idea of it is if you're cruising along, you have this LED set up on your dash, or if it's in a camper trailer, you have it set up somewhere that can be seen, and basically it will turn on to let you know that the charger is working, and then turn off if the charger is in standby mode. It can also flash fault codes, which are also indicated by all 7 lights on the front of the chargers flashing the same fault code to let you know if it's detected something it doesn't like, such as a good example would be a 5 flash fault code if you have a poor connection between the charger and your start battery. As it's been working away, it's noticed that the voltage drop away to too low a voltage. So it flashes that code to let you know you've got something you need to check up on, like a poor connection or something like that.
So it's similar to the Manager 30, you can hide this away anywhere and you don't need to rely on these lights here. You can have that wire anywhere where you're driving along, you can see it. And yeah, you can see that that is actually working just like a display on a Manager 30.
Correct.
Yeah. Well Cam, there was a lot of questions there, but I think we've covered just about everybody's questions. I don't think there's anything else we haven't covered within these charger ranges, so thank you very much for your time today.
Not a problem.
Really appreciated it.
Not a problem at all. If there are some more than welcome to feed them through the tech line on 1300 Redarc or email. Got myself and 6 other lads ready to answer questions.
Yep, that's awesome. Alright, thanks for having us today.
Not a problem.
Alright, thanks for watching guys. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you found it helpful. And we'll catch you to the next one. Cheers!